All right, well, a very warm welcome to the ABP session. I'm very grateful for anyone wanting to come and hear this particular part of the conference about unlocking the value of an ageing workforce, because it is undoubtedly a very big, a very real, very significant issue, and one that I'm really quite passionate about and excited about. So I want to kind of give you a bit of a sense as to the session and what we're actually going to be covering today. And I think to give you some context to the survey and the research that we'll be sharing with you, it's helpful to give you an idea as to who we are, why we've done this. I'll give you a little bit of an overview about the survey findings themselves. And then really what we're trying to get to at that point is a so what step, and therefore what are the next steps that we can do about it. So, well, who are we? We are a community-based, not-for-profit. We help people as they get older to think about and explore their next career steps. I would consider that we are innovative and socially responsible. So we ask people to donate their time to us if they work in a different role. And then we get people to come in and shadow those people. Those people pay a fee, and that fee goes to support charity enterprises. So we fit very firmly into when organizations talk about the environmental and social responsibility objectives, we fit very firmly, I would suggest, into the social responsibility category. We're doing this largely because I think the world of career coaching and career change lacks a lot of rigor and lacks evidence-based. And so rather than get upset about it, we're actually trying to do what we can to change it and make it a stronger proposition. And I think part of what makes it a stronger proposition is actually building a community around this. In the same way that people might be riding Peloton bikes, part of what makes that exciting is knowing that you are competing against other people, or that other people are kind of in the same place, thinking the way that you are. And that is what we try and recreate through this. So we have a sort of a three-month more intensive, but over a kind of a 9-month period follow-up. And we bring people along in smaller cohorts to try and create those that sort of sense of community and learning and supporting each other. And as I said, we sort of feature chances for people to go and spend time understanding and learning from experts in different fields. I would suggest that that's been harder over COVID. So we have done much less of the job shadowing side of things for the last 18 months, but we're very much hoping to restart that up. I think to give some colour, I'm going to introduce you to some of the sorts of people that we help.
I got to the point where I really needed some expert advice on where to go next.
Certainly opened my eyes in a few regards, a few things like insurance, things like that, medical stuff.
It's a really, really cool way to get you behind the scenes. Being housewife and mom for 10 years and going back, it's not that easy.
And also hearing about it from a non-career advisor.
And she's been really, really generous in kind of opening up her contact books to me.
Seeing in practice what the business you want to run actually works.
I'm saying that's something that I can possibly do as well in the future.
And I think part of the reason I share that is because we're about to start getting into sort of survey territory and numbers. And I think it's important to remember there's a very human element behind a lot of what I will be talking about with you today. Just before we get into the survey itself, again, I just want to sort of start reminding people how it is from a kind of a starting point. How is it that we actually tend to make decisions in the first place? For example, if you're about to marry someone, I would suggest that you would spend some time dating them first. If you're going to buy a house, likewise, I would suggest that you probably feel an extra level of security around your decision if you spend some time viewing it and understanding potentially how close it is to the road and its proximity to the local sewage site. Things like GCSEs, you don't tend to walk into them blind. You've probably had a chance to study French, Spanish. Tasha, who's our session moderator here today, you're studying languages. You probably had a chance to experience some of it before you've made a decision about your GCSE choices. And likewise, I mean, just almost anything. So think about this, for example, is a rambutan. Now, in order to tell me whether or not you enjoy eating rambutan, you probably have to have tried it first to have a better idea as to whether or not you really enjoy that. When it comes to the world of work, however, we are remarkably ill-equipped to understand what it is we might be getting into. This, for example, is a job description. and people will probably tend to spend some time looking at jobs boards. And yet I challenge any one of you to really say whether or not the job you're doing now bears any resemblance whatsoever to the job you originally signed up for. When I consider the sort of information you can find out on websites, this, I'm not sure you can read this, but some of the language, I'm going to read this for you just in case you can't. We want, looking for a dream team. We are like a professional sports team. We hire, develop and retain elite athletes only and place them in the right spots to win. We define brilliant people. We deliver honest feedback respectfully. It might hurt sometimes, but as a dream team, and so on and so forth. I would suggest that things like this might potentially put off some of the older workers. I'm not sure a lot of us would always see ourselves as elite athletes. But also we might be told, or career coaches might encourage us to go and do some networking, develop your networking skills. Organizations will helpfully give us skills and courses on networking. But in reality, if you are a housewife and you have been at home for the last 15 years, your chances of finding and being able to network with people in different sectors is remarkably reduced. And that isn't necessarily a reflection on people's skills or abilities. It is a reflection on the fact that we rely on a system that doesn't necessarily support people in making better decisions for themselves about their careers. When we consider, for example, in the UK at the moment, so I've taken this off the Balfour Beatty website yesterday, because construction is one of those sectors that is supposedly in desperate need for workers. Now, if you look through the job opportunities, the thing that might come closest is early careers. So you click on early careers and up comes a page that talks all about parents, teachers, graduates, summer placements. The entire language around this is very much geared towards graduates and younger people. There is very little in there for the career changer. And that's a problem, right? Because what we know is that when people get older, after you've done a job for sort of 20, 30 years, you are, for want of a better word, bored and seeking a little bit of variety and wanting to make a change. And the size of the demographic is considerable. So, if we look at back in 1996, the number of people in employment over the age of 50 was 5.7 million. And that has literally more than doubled in just a 24-year period. And that will continue to grow. So 10.7 million is roughly a third of the population, a third of the working population at the moment. So it's a considerable demographic. And yet, we've got this crisis to do with pensions. So, I'm a Generation Xer, nearly 50 myself. And what I should have saved for my pension just to receive an annual income of 19,000 is 187,000. In reality, what most people have actually saved is 70. Now, if you actually want a pension of more like 30,000 a year, you need more like 350,000. And I would argue that 300,000 is not suddenly going to drop out of the sky for most people. The only option people will realistically have is to work for longer to meet their pension shortfall. And yet when they try to find opportunities, they will come smack up against the ageism and the age discrimination barrier. It is a reality. It is a valid experience. It is one that we understand, and yet organizations are not really talking about it. They're not really doing very much about it. So back in 2015, the DWP indicated that there was a massive need for organizations to spend more time talking about this, to actually put in place actions to support an aging workforce. And yet a poll by Centre for Aging Better, as recently as the end of last year, found that still we're in a position where only 1 in 5 organizations are even talking about it. Right? And that's talking, that's not necessarily doing. So we're still in the talking phase for the majority of organizations. And that's not good enough, not for this population. So I guess our contribution to this is, well, what can we inform in organizations in order to be better prepared and in order to put in place things that will help support our aging workforce? So we started this survey. We've had just over 5,500 respondents. We started it in November last year and we finished it in August. We shared it on our own website. We did the odd promotion on Facebook, but we also shared it in our newsletter. So we have over 2,500 subscribers. We didn't collect data on ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, or religious orientation. So this is purely looking at age and gender alongside that. And it is also built a little on experience. So we did an initial survey a couple of years back for the NHS, which had 440 respondents. So we kind of already had a strong indication as to what the sort of data, the sort of questions that we knew we should be asking, and the sort of questions where actually there's very little data coming through. So we've built this on some experience. Just to kind of show, we had, as far as age is concerned, the vast majority of people were between the ages of 50 and 60. So this tiniest of slithers shows that there are a couple of people over the age of 65, but the entirety of our surveys, this is all 5,535 people, fall between pretty much the sort of the 41 to 65 age bracket. Gender is an interesting one. The career change space does tend to attract a lot more women into it. We see that a lot in terms of our, the job shadowing placements and the things like that we've been doing. But again, this one was answered by 4,658 people, and again, large majority of people female. Sorry, I should have had the numbers there. As far as employment status is concerned, 60% of people either part-time or full-time employed. A number of people, over 10% of people, self-employed, which again is a trend we're starting to see increasingly as people get older, and a significant proportion of people wanting to work but unable to find work. Okay, because we've got, I'm not going to run the Slido session. I'm going to present this in this way and just simply ask you to reflect. So the first question on our survey was this: what is the greatest driver for career change for people over the age of 50? So have a look through those options, reflect in your mind. If you want to pop something in the chat, you're very welcome to. But the answer for those canny enough to know was quite clear. So as people get older, so this was answered by all 5,500 people, but this greater sense of purpose that people want in their lives as they get older very much reflects the work of Shalom Schwartz, who is an award-winning psychologist who has devoted most of his life's work to understanding the core human values and how that drives behavior and motivations. So this is a very strong tick, if you like, in the Shalom Schwartz box, and significant representation of his findings. People are also very concerned with a job that's going to give them the flexibility that they need. And interestingly, they do want to learn, right? So this driver around learn, this sense or stereotype that old dogs can't learn new tricks is entirely wrong. This is a strong driver. Down here, you'll see pay. Pay is important, but by comparison, I think you'll agree, what we're looking at here is a population of people whose values have moved from being in their 20s, more around self-enhancement, so things like variety, stimulation, hedonism, to being much more transcending of themselves. So things like benevolence, giving back, wanting to make a difference, doing a job that has meaning. And I think that is a really, really good news story for employers. As an employer myself, the idea that someone would want to come and work for me with these sorts of values, I think is a real opportunity, and one that we simply are not seeing enough being made of. So second question, what do you think is the biggest barrier people face as they get older? So again, have some time to reflect on that. A lot of people would suggest that sometimes things like being financially trapped are, thanks Nicola, good suggestion. A lot of the time people would think that people are financially trapped. That's not necessarily the case. So yes, financially trapped is in there. However, by far and away, the much more significant problem that people have is that, and we're talking the tune of 4,100 people. So over 70% of people are saying that the biggest barrier that they have is they simply have no idea what it is they want to do next. There is a fallacy or an assumption that, when you're younger, you are entitled not necessarily to know what job it is you want to do because you don't have experience of it. When you get to your 50s, I guess the idea is that, well, by now you should know. the truth is that by this point in most people's lives, they've got a very good idea of what it is they may no longer want to do because they've been doing it for 20 years. But that doesn't necessarily equip them for an idea of what it is they might want to do next. Ageism, as we can see here as well, is a significant problem. So over 2,200 people have reported this as being a barrier to them. And yes, being financially trapped is in there. You can see here too, interestingly, people find the lack of flexibility. If there has been a silver lining to the COVID-19 cloud, let's hope it is that organizations now understand and appreciate that flexibility can be achieved. So if we consider, listening or thinking about that, what might some of the negative consequences be to people wanting to make changes but not being able to make them? I think that we would probably come up with this as being a reasonable list. I've heard language described to me, so people I go and speak to say things like, Lucy, we have this issue with people over the age of 50 who are kind of coasting towards retirement. They're doing their bare minimum to kind of get by. I think the language is quite unhelpful, and I would also argue that this is a rod that you have made for your own organisation's back. We hear language like, we've got people who are blocking jobs, not moving aside for younger people to come and move up through the organisation. You also get, I guess, the consequence that as we get older and we still want and have this desire to learn, without that level of investment, it's fairly difficult to feel valued, or it's fairly difficult to feel that there is that variety or stimulation that is available to you. I think the mindset that this helps to create as well is one of dependency. A lot of the time organizations have been fairly traditional in saying, well, your role and the one that we pay you for is the one that you can find some training and potentially some development around. Anything outside of that isn't related to your job, therefore it's not supported. And so the mindset is therefore, well, I need to be told what it is I need to learn, and I'm not necessarily going to seek things out for myself because it's just not going to be supported anyway. And for the people who do, so let's say they're outside and they're trying to network and they're trying to spend some time understanding a bit about different jobs and what's available out there, a lot of the time that would be looked down upon as a question about their commitment and their integrity, their loyalty to their organization, and the consequences that might have just simply mean that it is unpalatable to be honest about it. So we ask this final question that I will share with you here, which is, right, so what is it that organizations can do better? If you want to sort of be more engaged and if you want to kind of enjoy the next 10, 15, 20, 30, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think people should ever retire. But as far as you're concerned, what can organizations do better? And the standout point here was that simply organizations need to give over some time to allow people to explore and develop these new skills. It stands to reason that if the biggest barrier people face is that they simply don't know and they have no idea what it is that they want to do next, that the time that they might need, whether it's doing things like volunteering, whether it's going and doing some work experience or job shadowing, these are the sorts of things that organizations need to try and encourage internally to support internal mobility. But even if people are thinking about doing something outside, writing a book, baking cakes, opening up a community shop, the other sorts of things that might be important in people's lives, that can and should be accommodated, and increasingly will need to be as the kind of the rise of the portfolio career gains prominence. There is this talk about support in building confidence, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that next, so I won't say so much about it here. But I think this is a real, again, from a kind of a practical and a tangible idea to get over this issue of, I don't know what it is I want to do next. Well, actually quite a simple thing to do is to give people chances to shadow jobs that they might be interested in. I certainly remember, it was a while back, but when I was working in an organisation, I used to work in HR, and I would have been quite grateful for some of the people in the line to have spent a day with me to really appreciate what a typical day was like, and that, yes, you might see me as a cost centre, but actually I generate an enormous amount of value in the time that I'm at work. So I think there is some understanding that people can develop even within their own organisations about breaking down silo thinking. And even if people never want to move into logistics, having a better understanding of what the logistics people have to face and deal with is probably no bad thing. So this part of what I'm going to share with you, I would urge a little bit of data with. I mean, we're certainly not at the 100 people mark, but to date, we have helped 68 people meet, connect with, and shadow different experts. And what we find is that 47 of them, so just over 50%, do go on to make a career change. And, that, if I would suggest that, if I was to break that down even further, 26 of those people start their own businesses, but 12 of them are doing it reluctantly. So, you've got the people who are maybe a financial advisor, they go and they work out what it's really like to want to run a wine bar, or maybe that cheesemonger business that they had in the back of their mind, maybe that isn't going to work out. The idea of running a dog hotel, maybe the margins are just too small. And so they revert and they think, no, I will stick in my sector because that's my best chance to maintain my income level. However, chances for employment, certainly the ageism barrier that we're talking about, present difficulties. So you see a large proportion of people who are saying, right, I'm going to set up my own business because I cannot get a job doing what I used to be doing. We find that 17 people, or 25%, people go and try different roles and say, no, that's definitely not for me. I'm definitely going to stay in my job. Thanks very much. Really useful to have that itch scratched. And we have had people that we haven't heard back from. So not an entirely clear picture. So my anecdotal observations on this are that it's interesting. Men are more likely to go and shadow a job, and they're more likely to be the ones that come away and say, I don't want to do that job. Women, on the other hand, when they go and shadow a job, they're more likely to come away at the end of it and say, gosh, okay, I don't know why I've waited so long. And I think that this is interesting, and it's a useful reflection. There's been time and time again, this sort of research that's come out, Harvard Business Review, McKinsey's, I forget her name, who's done this research around the fact that, if women can't feel that they tick all of the boxes on a job description, then actually they're not going to apply. And we would suggest that the better way of dealing with that is not the job description that is undeniably a rather useless tool for helping people understand what a job is about, but actually giving them a chance to, sit in on that board meeting. You know what, the language is not beyond me. I definitely feel I can make a contribution. That, more than anything, is more empowering in helping people build the confidence they need to take the next step. As I said before, we find that when people do this kind of career change step and they spend some time doing another job, that actually the number of them that end up walking away and going back into a full-time job, it's 77% of the time that's men, only 32% of the time it's women. So when we see people going and leaving and setting up their own businesses, and I haven't fully explored all of the rationale for that. I'm guessing a lot of it typically historically has been because of lack of flexibility options, but a number of the people who end up setting up their own businesses is much higher women. So over 60% women, only 32% of women then go back into a full-time paid job. So this, I do believe, has some implications. So for recruitment, for example, so we've seen, I told you we did some work with the NHS. There's been a lot of work the NHS has started to do to try and get more people to understand what opportunities there are to experience some of the jobs and go and shadow people in organisations. This is an interesting, for anyone who's sort of interested in consumer experience or marketing, we've tested a couple of ads, again, for a couple of different organizations. And when we feature adverts with women, so here and here, and by the way, these are crafty roles, which again tend to have much higher levels of engagement, we see less engagement than if we feature ads with men. So there's an interesting phenomenon that if you put an advert on of a man, it doesn't seem to turn people off as much. If you put something of a woman up, for whatever reason, men definitely don't engage, but women don't engage as much either. And you can see that through the click-through rates here. So I think that's a really interesting. It's slightly sad in a way, but I don't know what it is, and this is potentially a really interesting research question. But I don't know what it is that means that this is a harder concept for men to get engaged with. I think there's a number of other things. So, I've highlighted at the beginning how difficult it is for the career changer to even find opportunities for them to engage with organisations. I would like to see the development of career changer schemes. So, instead of just throwing all of the resources at graduates and apprentices, actually highlighting words like career changer, midlife, later stages, latter stages. What we've also found is the term cohort in particular has significant appeal. So using that kind of language does get people more excited, because I think there's that sense of shared experience, and I'm not going through this alone. I'm actively not going to be in a minority. I've already indicated this point about men somehow being harder to engage in this. I think as far as development is concerned as well, we have to acknowledge that jobs aren't for life. And if jobs aren't for life, organisations need to have some responsibility to actually encourage and support and give time to people to understand and try and work out for themselves what it is that they might want to do next. I would suggest, there are other organisations I've put up there as an example, Monzo. They offer people the chance to do 32 days a year unpaid to do whatever it is, whether it's pasta making course, whether it's time building their own startup. They are sending a very strong message which says your personal development is important. You need to think about the next steps for your own career, because we're not really going to provide that for you forever. And if you do that, well, actually, we can probably help. We've built a startup ourselves, so maybe we can help mentor you too. And that, I would suggest, as an employment proposition, has huge appeal. Certainly the number of people applying for jobs there far outstrips the number of roles they have available. Some organisations are very good about supporting volunteering. I would encourage more of that. And again, this idea of flexible work. I think we've seen, and a lot of this conference has spoken about this, the ongoing trend towards flexible working. But I think there's a strong case as well for doing more to support internal mobility. We know people want to make changes. They don't necessarily want to just leave their job. They want to find their work within their own organisation. So for having rewarding managers who do some of the things that are not their day job and arguably speaking a bit difficult. So if someone wants to come and shadow your organisation or come and do some work experience in your sector of the organisation, a lot of the time there are barriers in place to prevent people from doing that. If, however, they can be rewarded, if there is almost a corporate citizenship tick in the box, you've met your brief, that sort of policy, if you like, will really help encourage these sorts of citizenship behaviours. If you've got staff as well who sort of say to you, maybe I want to move on into a different part of the organisation, instead of preventing them from doing that, but actually enabling them, well, if that manager is sort of held up as the pillar to the rest of the organisation about how brilliant this is helping internal mobility, maybe it will encourage more people to do it. Again, projects, secondments, chances to work kind of across the organisation, very good for building those relationships. And my plea as well is, please ditch the networking courses, because they work for the people who are confident and outgoing. I think it's much harder for people who are less orientated in that way to really benefit from that as a kind of a model. I think I would suggest that rather than try and change the people, it's much easier to change some of the processes. Have a system whereby it's your job, 300 whatever days of the year you do your day job, but actually 1 or 2 days of the year you need to spend time in other departments so you get a better sense of how the organisation works. Certainly not a bad idea. The mainstay of graduate schemes, hotel management courses, spend time in different departments and so on. And finally, as I say, this is a problem that is bigger than me. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us. So I'm going to let you hear from just a couple of people who we're working with at the moment.
Look beyond the covers, see what's the content, what has this person got to offer. And a lot of people in their 50s have a lot to offer.
Actually, there is such a great opportunity to help people contribute longer for society. And I don't know what all the answers are, but what I do know is that collectively we can find the answers.
And I would agree. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Akin, for your comments. I very much would encourage you. So, you know, our organisation, we're sharing these results. We kind of held off until sharing them for this conference. We published them on our website yesterday evening. I've just done a post about it on LinkedIn. We're running a course, or not a course, sorry, a seminar, a meeting. So if you're interested in this topic and you want to meet other people who are also talking about it, then I encourage you to come and sign up for that session. It will be the 3rd of November, 12:30 lunchtime. But also if you've engage with us on this. You know, we are a bunch of volunteers. And as I say, this is a bigger job than any one individual can work on. So, you know, we welcome support, we welcome your engagement and involvement. And if you've got some volunteer time to give, then please do consider joining us and giving us some of your time. That's it. Thank you very much.